Good evening, everyone. I'm Gabriele Finaldi, the director here. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to the National Gallery this evening. It's a very happy occasion. Tonight is the prize giving for the Denis Mahon essay. I used to be part of the jury of the essay, and it was always very stimulating to read some very interesting new art history, because as you all know, the prize is there for new work by young scholars, young students in the areas that Sir Denis himself was interested in. The winner will be announced in just a moment. Welcome to the trustees of the Denis Mahon Charitable Trust. Welcome Orietta, welcome Suzanne, welcome all. Welcome the judges also of the jury this year. It's a great pleasure for me to remember Sir Denis Mahon this evening. I joined the National Gallery in 1992, and at that time nobody told me that Denis Mahon was going to be part of my job description. It turns out that I spent an awful lot of time with him, and it was the greatest honour and one of the things I'm most grateful for to the National Gallery, for having introduced me to Sir Denis and for enabling me to spend a lot of time with him. And the time spent with Denis was always extremely stimulating, extremely interesting. He had a long history, of course, with the National Gallery that went way back beyond when he became a trustee. He first became a trustee of the National Gallery in 1957. But in fact, his connection with the gallery started almost a quarter of a century before that. He came to the National Gallery and offered himself to Kenneth Clarke as director to be what became known as the honorary attaché to the gallery. I think he probably invented that title, but that was it meant effectively that he could come in and spend some time with the director and with the rest of the staff here at the gallery. He could learn, but he could also pass on the information that he knew, the experience that he'd accumulated up to then, which was at that point a rather brief existence. One of the things that he did as honorary attaché to the National Gallery was offer up one of the first pictures he acquired. He felt it was his duty that if he was going to be attached to the gallery, then he should offer the National Gallery any work that he acquired and give the gallery first right of refusal. And famously, when he acquired the Elijah by Guercino, he'd acquired it from the Barberini family at a moment when the Barberini were releasing some of their works of art. He immediately brought it to Kenneth Clarke and said, "I've just acquired this picture, but I feel it's absolutely my duty to give you the opportunity to acquire it for the National Gallery if you would like it." And Kenneth Clarke replied that it was a wonderful picture. He'd done very well to acquire it. It would be a wonderful thing for the National Gallery to have, but it would be impossible to persuade the trustees that this was an appropriate picture for the National Gallery. So Denis kept it himself, but of course in his mind already at that point, and he would say this time and again, already at that point he was thinking about forming a collection that would eventually join the National Collection, not only the National Collection, but other museums up and down the country, and of course in Ireland and in Italy too. So he continued collecting for himself, of course, but ultimately, of course, with a view to these pictures entering the public realm. And as you look around you here, you see several pictures that are in the collection thanks to him. In particular, of course, the great Guercino St. Gregory altarpiece over there to my right, and of course also the Sibyl here behind me. When he became interested in the Seicento, partly as a result of the encouragement of Kenneth Clarke, but also thanks to Nikolaus Pevsner, from whom he took private lessons, as it were. What he discovered was that the Italian Seicento was held in opprobrium, as we've just seen in the episode relating to the Elijah. The Italian 17th century was considered to be, in terms of painting, dishonest. It was considered eclectic, which was a bad thing. And he also pointed out that a lot of the pictures were very, very dirty. Very dirty. I don't mean dirty in that sense. I mean dirty physically. So he went about writing what turns out to be one of his most impressive publications and one of his first, Studies in Seicento Art and Theory. And one of the things he did there was to demolish, in a very, very powerful way, this idea of eclecticism in 17th century painting, but particularly when attached to the Carracci. With regard to the pictures being very dirty, what he began to do was to persuade museums to take an interest in their own 17th century pictures, and also for he himself in his own collection to clean these pictures, because to see them under dirty sort of gravy or sort of dark soup meant that you were losing much of what the intended impact of these works was supposed to be. So he says that when he began studying the Seicento in the 1930s, no guercino was clean. Not a single guercino could be seen for what the artist intended it to be. And as you look across the collection now, and the works by Guercino in the collection, both those which were in the gallery already and those which Denis himself gave to the gallery, you'll see that they are looking very wonderful. And a particularly good example, of course, is the St. Gregory altarpiece, which was cleaned really within the last generation. The magnificent blue of the sky, the dark forms of the Jesuits to left and right, the Pope, the glorious golden robe of the Pope. Denis always spoke about Guercino's ambition when he arrives in Rome, across the big spaces of the Roman churches and so on, that his pictures should tell across space. He became very animated when he talks about Guercino in Rome in the early 1620s. And this was the case in point. This was the demonstration picture where it was perfectly clear that Guercino had to adapt his manner, his style, in order to tell across the large distances of these Roman churches. I mentioned before that Denis was a trustee of the gallery in 1957 and then subsequently in the mid-1960s. And among the pictures that he was always very proud to have been acquired during his time as a trustee was a landscape by Isaias van der Velde, not something that you readily associate with Sir Denis. But then, of course, the late Caravaggio of the Salome with the head of John the Baptist. Now, there's a moral in that tale, and it's one that we're very conscious of, and we hope an episode like that won't quite be repeated. But famously, this was a picture that had been offered up to the National Gallery. Both the director and the curator responsible at that time for the Italian Seicento collection considered that it wasn't a picture that should be acquired for the national collection. But Denis, in his bulldozing manner, and some of you may remember the way when he latched on to something or decided that a certain thing should happen, there was very little that would stand in his way. And with the help of Henry Moore, who was a trustee at the same time, between them, they managed to get the board to agree to purchase the picture against the advice of both the director and the curator. Can you believe that? It's rather amazing. But anyway, it turned out, of course, that this was a very, very important acquisition for the gallery. There had been some doubt over the attribution, but Denis, of course, was very, very clear that this was a major late work by Caravaggio, and it sits now with great honour in the Seicento gallery here. I'm delighted that we can honour Sir Denis's memory this evening, and we can honour his generosity, because his generosity is not only the pictures which we see around us here at the National Gallery, or indeed in several other museums up and down the country, but he, I think, brought a great energy to our activities here at the gallery. He was tremendously encouraging of the curators and of the conservation team. He was really an affirming presence in the gallery, and we owe him a very, very great deal. I was particularly happy that we discovered that there had been a gift which had been made to the gallery by the charitable trust, the Denis Mahon Charitable Trust, which we'd not found a way to properly use. So when I was presented with this fact, I proposed that we publish a book of National Gallery masterpieces, a nice large book with wonderful reproductions to make us very proud of our institution, and I'm delighted that that has happened. That will be the prize that will be handed over to our essay prize winner this evening. You'll be able to see that, and indeed, if you want to, you can acquire it at the end of the evening. I also wanted to thank Ronnie Gobin, who is the managing director of Thiesbald and Pièces Montées, who helped the National Gallery to produce the publication. It is a very fine piece of work, as you'll see in just a moment. Could I, at this point, hand over to Ms. Orietta Benocci-Adam, who's also been a very good friend of mine in the 1990s and a great supporter of our activities here at the gallery. And it's a great pleasure to welcome you here this evening. Orietta.
The Sir Denis Mahon Foundation was created by Sir Denis in his lifetime. It aims to continue his philanthropic work, his art historical research, and his passionate promotion of young scholars, students, and artists. It promotes his art collection and lifelong work and studies to the general public, and organizes exhibitions. This year, we were at the Festival of the Two Worlds in Spoleto with a version of our exhibition Visions and Visionaries, earlier shown at Guildhall Art Gallery in London. The Foundation supports museums and endows 2 annual prizes for young scholars and artists, the Sir Denis Mahon Essay Prize and a drawing prize at the Royal Drawing School, the Mahon Award. This year, we also began discussions with City and Guilds of London Art School to institute the Sir Denis Mahon Sculptural Project Grant, another initiative to honor his memory. Sir Denis's Library and Archive and National Gallery of Ireland remains a most important ongoing project for us, as is the restoration of the Pinacoteca Civica in Cento, the birthplace of his beloved Guercino, following the terrible earthquake in 2012. Tonight, we are here for the Sir Denis Mahon Essay Prize. This is an annual prize for young scholars to write on the periods of art that Sir Denis studied, or on subjects that he was interested in, with a presentational lecture of the winning essay at a renowned public institution. We are privileged to hold Sir Denis's Essay Prize at the National Gallery this year. And on behalf of the Foundation, I would like to thank the director, Gabriele Finaldi, and all his colleagues for having made it possible. I have vivid memories of Sir Denis's 100th birthday celebrations here in 2010, when together with Tash Alford, we organized a memorable party for him, and the image of his smiling face arriving at what he regarded his second home is still very fresh in our memory. I would also like to thank all the judges of the Essay Prize who have given their valuable time to us. Amongst them, we have Dr. Stephen Berry, Cristiana Romalli, Professor David Exerjan, Dr. John Spike, and Professor Marcello Pecchioli. In particular, this year, we had the great pleasure of having Dr. Edward Payne as one of the judges. He was the first recipient of the Sir Denis Mahon Essay Prize in 2012, when he presented his winning essay, Hung, Drawn and Torture, Violence in Drawings by Guercino and Ribeira, at the Courtauld Institute of Art. It is very inspiring to young scholars to see that this year, Eddie is one of the judges, and we would like to congratulate him and thank him. I would now like to hand over to my co-trustee, Suzanne Marriott, who will introduce the winner of the 2019 Sir Denis Mahon Essay Prize. Thank you.
The trustees are delighted to announce that this year's winner, after a record number of entries, is awarded to Maxime Michel with his essay entitled Watteau's Gersaint Signboard as a marketing tool aimed at the nouveaux riches of the John Law system of paper money and economic speculation. Two of the judges have commented as follows: Watteau's painting of Gersaint's sign is numbered amongst his masterpieces and as such has attracted a vast literature. Author Maxime has read the relevant scholarship while focusing on an extra artistic circumstance, namely the economic crisis of law's system. Well written and skillfully organised, this essay deserves a high ranking in this year's excellent class of candidates for the Mahon Prize. The scholar successfully demonstrates that paintings, drawing, and works of art were serving different purposes already in those days and provided a marketing and communication tool of great importance. Maxime has studied history of art at the Courtauld and the Sorbonne, and studied law and economics in France, and has worked in China and France. He is currently working on a start-up art project and continues to study law. Please welcome Maxime Michel.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Sir Denis Mahon Foundation, I would like to express my gratitude to the trustee of the foundation for giving me the opportunity to be here tonight. It's really an honor for me to be here in such a prestigious place and among such a distinguished audience. I also want to thank very much Miss Marriott for this very kind introductory speech. With no delay, we go back to 18th century France and to Regence period as a time of expansion of aristocratic refinement. My essay is about one of the most iconic artwork of this period. It is the Gersaint Signboard. It is 166 by 306 centimeters oil on canvas, made in 1720, and now displayed in Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin as part of the collection of House of Prussia. The Gersaint Signboard was made during the final year of the John Law system, a speculative system that ruled from 1716 to 1720, and that challenged the well-established boundaries of the Ancien Régime society by leading to the belief of the emergence of a new class of nouveaux riches. I would like to look at the signboard through the economic context that saw it made and show how the signboard was not just only a pleasant painting that put in place the fête galante theme created by Watteau in an urban context, but it was also a marketing tool designed to attract aristocrats, who are the customer depicted in the signboard, not only them, but also bourgeois and nouveaux riches in the context of the dynamic upward social mobility of John Law system. First, I'm going to focus on Watteau's life. Then I would like to make connection between the signboard and the economic context of the Regence period. Watteau came from a modest family in Valenciennes, north of France, a city recently rattached to the French kingdom following its conquest by Louis XIV in 1677. He soon showed an interest in drawing that led him to be the apprentice of a famous local painter, before he eventually went to Paris alone to pursue his formation while he was 18 years old. There, without resources, he had no choice but to work as a copyist of mediocre religious painting in a shop on Notre Dame Bridge. Notice it will be in the same bridge in the center of Paris that he will paint his signboard some 10 years later. Here he would also meet with Claude Gillot, an elder painter, that will led him to develop a taste for depicting actors from Commedia dell'arte. Watteau became well known thanks to its original style and his famous Fête Galante, a depiction of frivolous parties in a countryside environment in which people were mainly wearing fancy costumes that would answer to the taste of aristocrats in a context of rejection of the previous Louis XIV French classicism style that was one element of the policy of the Sun King. Here I show you an example of this grand genre painting, which is about praising great history and emphasizing on drawing to the detriment of color. It is Alexander in Babylon, made in 1665 by Charles Lebrun. While the king became old and more involved into religions, wars and death in royal family made the court life more and more unattractive for aristocrats, in a context in which the personal mood and mindset of the king would very much influence the ambience of the court society. Consequently, a lot of aristocrats choose to leave Versailles to go back either on their lands in countryside or in Paris, that saw the multiplication of urban palaces, hôtels particuliers, and the emergence of aristocratic pleasure associated to an urban context. Watteau paintings, with their gracious figures and implicit sexual connotation, will be symptomatic of this society that became aware of a pleasure that could be pursued for itself, without being afraid of any moral consequences. And this fact can actually be supported by looking at the signboard. In the shop space of the signboard, there is a few religious paintings depicted on the wall. Year after year, the recognition of Watteau would increase, leading him to extend his network among the high bourgeois and aristocratic circles that would be his patrons. The painter was received member of the Royal Academy of Painting in 1717, thanks to this painting, the embarkation to the island of Cythera. And doing so, he challenged the concept of hierarchy of artistic genre by being welcomed under a new category, especially created for him, the category of Fête Galante. After his death in 1721, a lot of artists will pursue his style, not only in paintings, but also in decorative art, leading to the emergence of the rocaille or rococo style. However, Watteau paintings are not just about a naive praise of aristocratic leisure. Looking at his work, one can feel a melancholic atmosphere and a sense of transience that grows from his treatment of light at dusk. The depiction of people in theater costumes position his scenes as if they were part of a dream or mirage. The empty and melancholic gaze of Watteau's Gilles, executed in 1718, is generally associated to the figure of Watteau himself, who, despite his mundane success among aristocratic and bourgeois circles, was preoccupied by a lung disease that will pursue him in his last years, leading to his health decline and eventually to his death at the age of 37. Now, let's focus on Gersaint's signboard again. As a signboard, the painting was supposed to be displayed above the entrance of Edmé François Gersaint, who was by this time a 26-year-old ambitious art dealer, or so-called marchand mercier. Gersaint was officially accredited marchand mercier the same year, 1720. In the corporative and very strict economic organization of Ancien Régime, marchand merciers were entrepreneurs that had the monopoly on the trade of a limited list of luxury goods, and who made the connection between the orders from bourgeois and aristocracy and artisans. Not only they sell paintings, but they play a key role in passing these orders to all the corporations, not only the cabinet maker, but also the bronze sculptor and the engraver, to achieve the construction of a common piece of furniture or to implement the decoration of bourgeois and aristocratic houses. Here, I show you a commode made thanks to the patronage of a marchand mercier. It's interesting because looking at it, you can see that different artisans are involved in the process of fabrication, not only the cabinet maker, but the bronze sculptor, and the artisans who were supposed to put gold leaf on bronze, and because of the corporative system, this artisan can't be the same actually than the bronze sculptors themselves. And marchand mercier were at the core of these artisans, trying to coordinate them to implement a common piece of furniture. And this commode is also interesting because it used Japanese lacquer, which by this time was a very expensive material. So the role of the marchand mercier was also to provide funds in order to enable the cabinet maker to use it, to integrate it in his piece of furniture. But I close the parenthesis and I go back to Gersaint signboard. Watteau is said to have taken the initiative to paint the signboard as a gift for Gersaint, who was hosting him in his shop, located, as I said, on Notre Dame Bridge. According to Gersaint, it was painted in only 8 days, probably in the spring 1720, while the entire facade of Gersaint shop was rebuilt. As we will see later, the shop sign depicts an ideal vision of the shop space of Gersaint that strongly contrasts with the actual one, with the real one. As you can notice, the shop space is depicted as if there was no wall between the street and the inner space, which there was a wall, but Watteau chose not to depict it. In the shop space, several groups of aristocrats, recognizable thanks to their refined clothes and the fact they have swords, which was a legal privilege of aristocracy under Ancien Régime, are enjoying the goods proposed by the dealer and his wife, Marie-Louise, depicted on the right. On the left, employees are packing sold artifacts. The signboard is made of 2 canvas. There is a line that at the very center that separates both, and you can notice there is a slightly difference in terms of colors between both. It was probably fitted in a wooden semicircular frame, as you can see here. Jean-Baptiste Pater, who worked in the continuation of Watteau's style, is said to have modified it by adding the common man you can see on the very left, and by lowering the width of the painting and extending its height in order to convert the signboard, the format of the signboard, into the one of a salon painting, as it is now displayed in Charlottenburg. The signboard has been the subject of an extensive scholarly literature. Scholars often focus on the portrait of the recently deceased Sun King. You can see on the left. Its presence connects with the name of the shop, Au Grand Monarque, the Great King. The portrait depicted in the shop sign seems to be a copy of the famous portrait of the king by Hyacinthe Rigaud, that was often copied and became one of the symbols of absolutism. However, far from praising the king, the fact his portrait is already half in the box and turned does not only symbolize the coming of a new age, because Louis XIV died some 5 years before, but it can also be seen as a direct critique of him. Indeed, the old king was more and more disliked by the end of his reign, not only because of the authoritarian direction took by his policy, but also because of the wars and economic troubles and famines that were linked to his last war of Spanish succession. The French kingdom is said to have lost 1.5 million inhabitants between 1700 and 1715. And as I say, these troubles also massively increased public debt. At the death of Louis XIV, it was the equivalent of 10 years of budget. The signboard could be mocking the penniless monarchy. The presence of a bale of straw reflects the fact the portrait of the king is laid down on straw, meant to protect it in the shipping box. It echoes to the French expression être sur la paille, to lay on the straw, meaning to be ruined. The image of the ruined king strongly contrasts with the consumerist attitude of the Regence period, symbolized by the aristocrat depicted on the right. Let's pay more attention to the economic context during which was painted the signboard. The Regence period indeed saw the implementation of an innovative economic system, the law system, or Lass system. This was called after the Scottish economic theorist and adventurer John Lass. His name was pronounced Lass in Old French, who was appointed Contrôleur Général des Finances, Minister of Finances, in 1720 by the new ruler of the state, the regent Philippe d'Orléans. As a way to stimulate investment and trade and finance French colonial expansion in Louisiana, Lass created a new bank in 1716, Banque Générale, that will become Banque Royale in 1718, and he created a paper currency that was theoretically free convertible into metal cash at a fixed rate, and which had a huge success. The bank later merged with Compagnie des Indes, a company that was not only in charge of the colonial trade but also of tax collection, and they merged in 1720. So at the end, John Law was not only the manager of a bank, but he was also in charge of tax collection, and he was also managing the colonial trade, plus he was the Minister of Finance. And all these companies merged into one single, we know under the name of the system. The last system had a massive social and economic impact. Soon, Quincampoix Street, the headquarters of Banque Générale, became the meeting point of a large number of people from various walks of life coming from all over Europe. The population of Paris grew by 1/3 while the system was ruling, and between 12 and 50% of French households were said to have deposit in Banque Générale. So here I show you a Dutch print made in the summer 1720, just after the collapse of last system. It actually turns into derision the system, and it's interesting because you can see it's a theater stage. Two actors from Commedia dell'arte are opening curtains to show a theater stage on which a theater play is happening, which is nothing other than the speculation itself happening in Quincampoix Street by this time. And you can see there is a client of the bank who is fed by the bankers with gold coins, and through the digestion process of the clients, the gold coins are turned into paper money, and all the traders are gathered around the back of the client to try to grab some paper money. As a symbol of this mass hysteria, John Law himself was said to have, on the 25th of November 1719, so exactly 300 years ago, day for day, threw coins on people from the windows of Banque Royale for his own entertainment. Painted at the climax of the last system, the signboard could testify of the actual consumerist expansion of this period, and is apart from the fête galante in a countryside environment theme developed by the dreamer painter. The signboard can actually be seen as a symbol of the virtue of trade and purchasing in the context of the last system. Watteau had a particular connection with a certain group of interest that gathers bourgeois and aristocrats very much involved in the success of the system, not only because of their investment in colonial trade, but also because of their genuine trust in the system and in its social benefits. Taking the example of the industrialist Jean Julien and the banker Pierre Crozat, a lot of Watteau sponsors were also part of this group of interest, and Watteau himself invested part of his money in the last system, which was saved thanks to the advice given to him by Julien. Together with the regent, this group of interest used Nouveau Mercure, the most widely read newspaper in the kingdom by this time, as well as etchings, plays, poems, to praise consumerism as a new form of virtue and invite people to spend. creating what the historian of the economy Arnaud Aurin called a carnivalesque propaganda. Here you have a print which is made by Claude Gillot, who, as I said, is a painter that very much influenced Watteau in his early career. And here Gillot is depicting the career of a trader who first was a lackey in an aristocratic house and who grabbed knowledge about banking reading a book. And after he went to the bank, and he eventually met with wealth. And in the wave of this carnivalesque propaganda, people were invited to follow the path of such an example. A sentence extracted from an article of Nouveau Mercure of April 1720 could easily illustrate the signboard and its aristocrats that comes to buy luxury goods. It says, "The ridiculous splendor of a thoughtless expenditure does not render it any less useful to society, and the mad profusions repairs the bad initial distribution of wealth even better than a reasonable use of it." Probably the most iconic work that symbolizes this confidence in the virtue of trade will be the massive allegory of finance, which was 8.4 by 41.6 meter, painted by the Venetian painter Giovanni Pellegrini for the selling of Banque Royale in 1720, which was lost a few years later. I can't show it to you because with the collapse of the system, the Banque Royale was destroyed and the painting was lost. Let's now focus on the marketing dimension of the signboard. As a marketing tool, the signboard would have been at first sight only appealing to aristocrats, but also to bourgeoisie which wanted to imitate aristocratic culture. For aristocrats, the consumption of luxury goods was a way of self-affirmation, and they did not fear personal bankruptcy, as the fact to maintain their ranks was more important than anything else. The shop space is here to provide the goods to do so, and these goods would have been all the more attractive that the early 18th century saw the emergence of a new class of connoisseurs among the high society. More than a simple trade space, the shop sign seems to be a meeting point for aristocrat customer, particularly trendy and graceful. Also, each aristocrat of the signboard is depicted with a woman. The shop space appears as an ideal space where men could come to highlight their own sophistication and master of the art of the conversation to seduce women from the high society. Moreover, the signboard also functioned as a proclamation of Gersaint himself as a successful and noble dealer. However, as a marketing tool, the signboard probably targeted a larger public than the aristocracy. Before it collapsed in summer 1720, the last system was source of rapid and easy fortunes that have a massive impact in common psyche. Indeed, many primary sources testify to the fantastic enrichment of common people and underline the increasing display of luxury in Paris streets that was cause of a feeling of confusion. The system challenged the difference between appearance and real status and led to the emergence of the myth of the ex-laquais financier. In newspaper, stories were written about well-dressed lackeys who were said to have bought the coaches of the master they just left after spending one day in Cacapois Street doing speculation, and women from aristocracy were said to encounter with their own cooks where they sit at the opera. The dynamic social context of last system could lead common people to foresee or hope that their economic situation would improve in a short time, enabling them to see themselves as a customer of the signboard and to become considered as aristocrat by the simple fact of acquiring the artwork depicted. It would have been all the easier for them that last system would facilitate the connection between Gersaint and nouveau riche customers by providing a good solution to one of the severe issues faced by Ancien Régime economy, the lack of cash and the huge reliance on credit, the lack of metal cash and the huge reliance on credit that could last for years. Under last system, any customer could purchase instantly in Gersaint shop thanks to paper money, it changed the relationship between merchants and customers. The latest did not need anymore to be known or trusted by the merchant before purchasing. To some extent, the signboard was also a tool of mystification, offering an ideal vision to the passerby that strongly contrasted with the actual state of the shop. The actual shop space, as you can see here, was smaller, darker, with a low selling height. And the actual stock of the shop was probably also very different, with paintings of lower quality. And we know from primary source that Gersaint was also selling much more furniture, and there is actually no furniture depicted in the shop space. Gersaint shop might have been particularly unattractive for aristocrats, considering not only its real stock, but also its location. Indeed, the crowded and narrow Notre Dame bridge was often associated to the cliché of the uneducated and simple-minded client, leading the artist Pierre-Charles Trémolière to execute some 7 years later a drawing that could be understood as a parody of the signboard, on where the so-called connoisseurs are depicted as donkeys. Moreover, it seems unlikely that aristocrats will come to the shop of the newcoming and unknown dealer on their own through the dirty street of Paris. You can see, looking here, how narrow was Notre Dame bridge. And because it was a bridge, it was supposed to connect both parts of Paris. So a lot of people were coming here, not only to look at the shop, but just to cross. So it was crowded and considerably dirty. In that context, it seems unlikely that aristocrats will come to the shop of the newcoming and unknown dealer by their own, in this dirty street, without any of their servants. The gracious lady with her long pink dress, coming to one of the most frequented streets of Paris, which would have been consequently quite dirty, is unlikely. It is more likely that aristocrats sent intermediaries to the shop to negotiate for them, or that marchand merciers came to aristocratic houses to present their stock. In conclusion, the Gersaint signboard by Watteau, made in 1720, is a depiction of fashionable aristocrats in an attractive shop as a transposition of the fête galante atmosphere developed by Watteau in an urban context. The signboard led to various interpretations among scholars, some of them emphasizing the fact the painting praises the act of purchasing. Such a way to look at the painting can be seen as particularly relevant, knowing the economic and historical context that saw it made. Last system, with its implementation of paper money and speculation, had a massive impact not only in daily life, but also in the collective psyche, due to a carnivalesque propaganda in newspaper and visual art. Such an impact would have led Watteau to execute a painting that testified to the particular business effervescence the system entailed, a painting that would praise the purchase of luxury goods. This view could be supported by the close relations Watteau maintained with some bankers and supporters of the system, and his growing interest for material success. As a signboard, the work was also a marketing tool displayed just above Gersaint's shop, and whose purpose was to attract customers and proclaim the young Gersaint as a noble dealer. Considering the location of the shop and the social shifts linked to last system, with the rise of new fortunes and the challenge of social barriers and appearances, the signboard was probably, and paradoxically, displayed to be seen by and to attract non-aristocratic classes. The bourgeoisie and the unrich commoners were particularly concerned. It was for them the promise that they could become the fashionable aristocrat depicted in the signboard by mimicking their taste and manners and by going to the Gersaint recently opened shop to purchase artworks. Such a message could be interpreted as a crude attempt, as the contrast between the idealized shop and the real one was obvious to any passerby. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that wonderful lecture, Maxime. It was most revealing on one of the most fascinating pictures of in Watteau's career, and fascinating picture in the 18th century. It's about picture collecting, picture purchase, how it fits into the economic construction of French society at this time. I think you've given us many ways to think about the picture and to be introduced into its complexity. So thank you very much. It falls to me to give you, as the first recipient of the National Gallery Masterpieces of Painting, it falls to me to hand this over to you and shake your hand. All of us in the room wish you the very, very best in your future career. I think there's a great future career ahead of you. Please all stay on to celebrate the Denis Mahon prize giving. Please stay on, come through to the Barry Rooms here to my left, stay on for supper and for conversation. Welcome all to the National Gallery. Please have a wonderful evening here tonight. Thank you.